In the dim corridors of Seattle's Central Police Headquarters, a janitor pushed his mop in silence. No one noticed the steady rhythm or the way his eyes watched everything. He wasn't there to clean. He was there to uncover a secret buried deep in the force. Once he flew helicopters through war zones, carrying men who never came home. Now he worked under flickering lights, haunted by the past and by the name of a mission long erased, H-47. When a single word over a security radio reached his ear, he froze. The war he thought was over had just begun again. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Rain whispered against the glass like a confession. Seattle's night stretched long and dim, painted in the dull gold of streetlights and the smell of wet concrete. Ethan Cole moved quietly through the corridor, his mop gliding over the tiled floor. 45 years had carved lines around his eyes, not from age, but from memory. His hair had gone darker with rain and time, and the faint stubble on his jaw shadowed a face that had once known command. He wore a plain gray janitor's uniform, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, his boots scuffed but clean. To anyone passing, he was invisible, just another man keeping the place from falling apart. But beneath the skin of that calm face was a soldier buried alive. A man who once flew through sandstorms and tracer fire, now wiping footprints from a police hallway. He paused at the end of the corridor, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights. In the supply room, a small metal locker stood open. Inside lay a dented tin box. Ethan lifted it gently, as one might hold a heartbeat. Inside were two things, a charred piece of flight suit fabric and a folded letter with edges browned by time. His wife's handwriting, steady, neat, and gone. If you ever fly again, fly for something good. He closed the box softly, pressing it to his chest for a moment before setting it back. Sometimes that was the only sound he made all night, the quiet click of metal closing over memory. Outside, thunder rumbled low across the city. In the shadows by the window, a shape stirred. Ranger, a German shepherd with black and tan fur and calm amber eyes, lifted his head. The old dog had scars where bullets once grazed his leg, but his gaze was steady. Ethan reached down, brushing his fingers over the dog's ear. "Easy, buddy," he murmured. "Just us tonight." Ranger settled beside his feet, sighing as if he, too, carried the weight of things unspoken. Later, near midnight, Ethan passed the surveillance wing. A flicker of light from an open door stopped him. He heard voices, low, sharp. "H-47 still open. Make sure no one from the old unit finds out." Ethan froze. The sound sliced through him like cold steel. H-47, the call sign of the helicopter that went down years ago, killing his crew, ending his life in the sky. He leaned closer, every instinct from his old life returning. The silence, the breath control, the pulse tightening in his throat. He didn't see faces, only shadows cast against the glass, but the words burned themselves into his mind. When the lights dimmed and the voices faded, Ethan stood there for a long time. The mop dripped water onto the floor, small circles spreading outward like ripples on a forgotten sea. He stared at his reflection in the glass, a janitor's face but eyes that still searched the horizon. The past was not done with him. It had only been waiting for the right night to whisper his name again. He turned, whistled softly for Ranger, and began walking down the sea. Hall. His steps were slow, careful, as though he already knew this quiet life would soon dissolve into the storm that once took everything from him. But this time, he wouldn't run from it. Morning came slowly to Seattle. The rain had stopped, but the city still looked wet, like a mirror that refused to dry. The windows of the police headquarters held the gray of dawn, and in that quiet reflection, Ethan Cole saw a face he barely recognized. He moved with quiet precision, the way he once did inside a cockpit, every step calculated, every breath steady. His janitor shirt clung lightly to his frame, sleeves rolled up, hands rough from cleaning agents. But behind those calm gestures was a mind still tracing flight paths, still reading danger in silence. His eyes, once used to scanning skies, now followed cables, cameras, and the way people spoke when they thought no one listened. In a world of polished floors and flickering screens, he was both ghost and witness. Ranger padded beside him, nails tapping faintly against the tile. The German shepherd's coat caught the pale light, his breath slow and rhythmic. They worked as one, man and dog, both trained to survive the unseen. Later that day, Ethan passed the armory wing. He saw Captain Ryan Carter, a tall man in his early 40s, broad shoulders beneath a black uniform jacket. His once bright eyes now carried the distance of someone who had seen too much and chosen silence. Carter's voice, when he spoke to the guards, was clipped, efficient, the same voice that had shouted Ethan's name through rotor noise years ago, pulling him out of burning wreckage. Back then, Carter was a friend. Now there was something different in his tone, something measured, cold. Ethan stood for a moment, mop in hand, and felt the air shift between them like a current under glass. That night, the hum of computers filled the surveillance room. Ethan stayed behind after his shift, alone except for Ranger sleeping by the door. He worked his way into the digital archives, using codes he shouldn't have known. The monitor glowed blue across his face, its light deepening the lines of fatigue and grief. And then he saw it, an encrypted file chain connecting Carter's security clearance to Victor Hale, the head of Hale Aerosystems. The name landed heavy, like a stone dropped into deep water. Hale, the man whose company built the helicopter that fell, whose signature sealed the death of everyone Ethan loved. A faint growl came from Ranger. The dog's ears twitched toward the door, nose flaring. Ethan smelled it too, oil and propellant, the same scent that clung to hangars, to nights before takeoff. The same scent from that day. He closed the file, heart tightening. There were no coincidences here. Not anymore. He leaned against the cool glass wall, eyes closed, listening to the slow tick of the city beneath him. The building felt hollow, its silence vast. Somewhere below, water from a leaking pipe dripped onto concrete, a sound steady and patient, like time itself. Ethan whispered to no one, "It's starting again." His reflection in the glass looked back, calm and resigned. But in that calm was resolve. He had cleaned floors long enough. Now he would start cleaning the truth. Smoke still hung in the air hours after the blast. It carried the scent of burnt plastic, oil, and dust, the kind that clings to skin and stays long after the fire is gone. Seattle's sky was gray again, as if the city itself was tired of hope. Ethan Cole woke to a ringing in his ears and a heavy taste of metal in his mouth. His hands were cut, his lungs full of smoke. The warehouse had become a ruin. Twisted beams, shattered glass, a half-collapsed ceiling letting in weak daylight. Somewhere beyond the debris, a sound broke through, a low bark, rough and desperate. Ranger. Ethan pulled himself up, limping toward it. He found the dog bruised but alive, muzzle blackened with soot, tail barely moving. "Good boy," Ethan whispered, voice cracked. Ranger pressed his head against Ethan's knee, trembling. For a moment, that simple contact steadied him more than any medicine could. Later, at the hospital, the world blurred between morphine dreams and memory. He was back in the cockpit, sunlight flashing on the metal controls, Lauren's voice in his headset. "Ethan, drop altitude. The system's overheating." Then another voice cut in. Carter's, calm, certain. "Negative. Maintain height." And then came the fire, the scream of engines breaking apart, the world turning white. He woke again, breath ragged, heart heavy. His hand searched instinctively for his wedding ring, gone since that day. The pain had dulled over the years, but grief had only changed shape. It lived quieter now, like a scar beneath the skin. When he was discharged, Ethan returned to the site. The place was cold and silent, nothing left but ash and paperwork scattered in puddles. He searched until his fingers bled, until he found a half-burned hard drive marked VH47. The letters glinted faintly under the gray light. Victor Hale. He took it home, wiped the soot off, and set it beside his tin box. The night grew long. Rain tapped the windows in slow rhythm. When the drive flickered to life, Ethan saw a frame freeze on the screen, the logo of Hale's company, printed on the side of the downed helicopter. He leaned back, staring into the glow, the reflection trembling across his eyes. The past hadn't ended that day in the desert sky. It had only hidden, waiting to burn again. And this time, Ethan knew. He was standing in the middle of it. Night returned to Seattle like a bruise. The air was heavy, the kind that carried the scent of rain and rusted iron. In the far corner of the city's industrial district, where the lights from downtown faded into shadow, Ethan Cole sat in silence, watching a small green cursor blink on the edge of his computer screen. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. The plan was simple: plant false information about the file marked VH47, wait for whoever had been erasing the truth to take the bait. But nothing about this night felt simple. The walls around him were lined with peeling paint, the floor scarred with boot marks, remnants of a life that had seen too many kinds of war. Ranger lay nearby, head resting between his paws, his chest rising and falling slowly. The dog had grown quieter these past days, sensing the weight in Ethan's silence. Sometimes it seemed the old shepherd understood him better than any living soul. "Just a little longer," Ethan murmured, almost to himself. The computer pinged once, then twice. Someone had taken the bait. The trail led him to the precinct server, where Captain Ryan Carter's ID flickered across the log files like a signature of guilt. Ethan's chest tightened, not in surprise, but in recognition. Friendship had long since turned to distance, yet some part of him had kept hoping it wasn't true. He played back the intercepted recording, the voices low and steady. Hale's tone was clipped, deliberate. "Move the shipment tonight. If Cole suspects anything, deal with him." And then Carter's reply, quieter, heavier. "Understood." Ethan paused the audio. For a moment, there was only the hum of the monitor and the soft sound of rain outside. Betrayal didn't always shout. Sometimes it just arrived quietly, wearing a familiar voice. By dawn, news reached him before he could act. Ranger was gone. The leash by the door lay snapped clean, as if someone had cut through not just rope, but trust itself. Ethan's heart went hollow. The one life that had shared his silence, his pain, his nights of remembering, taken. He tracked the signal to an abandoned warehouse by the docks. When he arrived, the air smelled of oil and damp concrete. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, its light trembling over a cage. Ranger was inside, chained, eyes wide but unbroken. The moment their gazes met, something fierce and wordless passed between them. Ethan's hand tightened around the gun at his side, but before he could move, one of the guards turned. A growl cut through the air, then motion, fast, raw, unstoppable. Ranger lunged, teeth tearing through his restraint, the chain snapping like bone. Two guards fell before they could raise their weapons. Ethan ran forward, shouting his name, the sound echoing through the hollow space. In that moment, amid smoke and steel, he realized the truth. This fight was no longer about justice nor revenge. It was about the last bond left unbroken in a man's life. A bond of trust, of loyalty, of love that refuses to die. The night was still. Only the faint hum of the computer broke the silence, a fragile rhythm against the dark. Outside, rain fell again, softer this time, as if the city itself was trying to whisper an apology. Ethan Cole sat in front of the old monitor, its light washing over his face. His hands were steady, but his breath wasn't. The burned hard drive lay open beside him, its metal edges warped, its secrets waiting. He had seen many kinds of fire in his life, fire that took lives, fire that cleansed. But this one, this quiet digital glow, felt like the most dangerous of all. Ranger rested near his feet, chin on the floor, eyes following the man he trusted more than the world. Every so often, the dog lifted his head, sensing the tension in Ethan's shoulders. "It's all right, boy," Ethan murmured, though his voice said otherwise. The screen blinked once, twice. Then the audio began to play. Static filled the room first, like the crackle of distant thunder. Then a woman's voice, calm, steady. "The system's unstable, Victor. The hydraulics aren't holding." Lauren, his wife. Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't heard that voice in years. Another voice followed, male, smooth, cold. "Just follow the flight plan, Lauren. It's been handled." Victor Hale. And then one more voice, one he knew too well. "Don't tell him anything. He doesn't need to know." Carter. The sound faded. Silence rushed in like water filling a void. Ethan lowered his head, eyes burning. The truth didn't come as a shock. It came as confirmation of every fear he'd tried to bury. The accident that took his family, his life, his purpose, it wasn't a storm of fate. It was design. For a long time, he didn't move. The glow of the monitor trembled across his hands, over the tin box where Lauren's last letter still rested. He opened it again, fingers brushing the fragile paper. "If you ever fly again, fly for something good." Her words, once a comfort, now felt like a command. He turned to Ranger. The old dog was watching him, ears slightly raised, eyes gentle and certain. "We end this," Ethan said softly. "One last time." Ranger shifted closer, resting his head against Ethan's knee. That simple weight, the warmth of a living soul beside him, was enough to steady the shaking inside. Outside, dawn began to thin the night. Light crept along the floor, touching the metal box, the scarred hands, the tired face of a man who had lost everything. And yet, somehow, found a reason to stand again. The air smelled of metal and rain. The morning light crept through thin clouds, brushing against hangars and glass buildings along the Seattle waterfront. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt the sound of helicopter blades vibrating through his chest. It was a sound that used to mean freedom. Now it meant reckoning. He had found her again. Olivia Brooks, the investigative journalist he once saved from a combat zone. She was 34 now, sharp-eyed and steady, her voice low but certain. "You'll have one shot," she said. "When Hale unveils his new aircraft, the system goes live. If your evidence gets out then, it'll burn everything he's built." Ethan nodded. He wore a plain mechanic's jacket, the kind that blended in. His hands, scarred and careful, gripped the forged ID badge like a lifeline. Ranger sat by his leg, gaze fixed on the hangar where the past was waiting. The dog's ears twitched every time the wind shifted, as if it too could smell danger. By noon, the exhibition hall shimmered under the silver light of 1,000 screens. Businessmen and officers filled the rows, smiling beneath false civility. On stage, Victor Hale stood behind the sleek body of his latest machine, a helicopter designed to fly without a pilot. The crowd applauded. Ethan moved among the crew like he belonged there, invisible in his simplicity. His heart pounded, not with fear, but memory. He had flown through storms. He had carried dying men home. But nothing compared to the weight of this silence. When the system came online, he plugged the drive in. The big screen flickered. The applause died. Static filled the speakers, then a voice. Lauren's. "If anyone hears this, tell Ethan I always believed in him." For a moment, even the air seemed to stop. Ethan stood still, hand over his chest. The sound of her voice, soft, kind, steady, poured through the hall like light through dust. The crowd turned, confusion rising. Hale's face went pale. He shouted orders, but it was too late. Every monitor now showed the truth. Flight data, maintenance logs, Carter's authorization, Hale's voice ordering silence. Cameras flashed. Chaos bloomed. People shouted. Hale bolted for the exit, pushing through the crowd. Carter drew his weapon, eyes wild, torn between guilt and fear. Ethan moved without thought. Ranger followed, muscles tensed, breath hot in the wind. Outside, the sky opened above them, gray, wide, waiting. For the first time in years, Ethan looked up without flinching. He didn't know if this would end in light or fire, but he knew this. He was no longer the man hiding behind a mop. He was a pilot again, flying not for duty, not for vengeance, but for the promise in his wife's final words. Fly for something good. The storm came without thunder. Only wind, low, steady, cold, slid through the open hangar doors. Inside, the air smelled of oil and fear. The sound of footsteps echoed against steel beams, followed by a single voice calling out into the dark. "Carter, you don't have to do this." Ethan's tone was calm, worn, the voice of a man who had seen too much of life to hate easily. Carter stood near the plane's nose, his hand gripping a pistol. His face was pale beneath the harsh lights, jaw tight, eyes trembling between guilt and pride. Beside him, Olivia Brooks knelt, her hands bound, her breath unsteady. The years had turned Carter's strength into armor, and now even that armor cracked. "It's too late, Ethan," he said. "You think this is about money? This is survival." Ethan took a slow step forward, his boots scraping on concrete. "No, it's about the choices we make to live with ourselves afterward." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, gunfire, a flash, a sound, and a blur of fur. Ranger moved before the bullet reached its mark. The dog's body collided with Ethan's side, his growl lost in the explosion of sound. The shot hit flesh, and time seemed to stop. Ethan fell to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief, the air filled with dust, blood, and wind. Carter froze, hand shaking, the pistol slipping from his grasp. For a heartbeat, everything was soundless. Then Ethan's voice broke it. "You saved me once," he said softly, reaching for Carter's gun. "Now I'll return the favor. You'll live to face what you've done." Carter dropped to his knees, tears streaking down the grime on his face. Outside, sirens wailed, distant and growing. But the fight wasn't over. Across the field, Victor Hale sprinted toward the waiting helicopter, dragging a terrified child in front of him as cover. Ethan's breath caught. Ranger, bleeding, stumbled to his feet. His eyes, tired, loyal, endless, met Ethan's, and before Ethan could move, Ranger ran. The dog's stride was pure will, driven by something beyond command or fear. The gun fired again. The sound tore through the hangar, sharp as lightning. When the smoke cleared, the child was safe, Hale on the ground, the weapon kicked away. Ethan reached Ranger just in time to catch him before he fell. The dog's chest rose once, twice, then slower. Ethan's hands trembled over the blood on his fur. "You've flown far enough, brother," he whispered. The helicopter lights flooded the scene, washing everything in pale gold. Ethan lifted his eyes to the sky, gray, endless, full of wind, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like home. The morning came quietly. Mist drifted across the training field, soft and silver, blurring the line between earth and sky. The grass was damp, and the air smelled faintly of pine and rain. Ethan Cole stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the sunlight creep over the roofs of the new center. "Project Phoenix," the sign read, the name he and Olivia had chosen. It wasn't just a place for dogs. It was a place for second chances. 3 months had passed since that night. His body still ached when the weather turned cold, but the weight inside him was lighter. Ranger, patched and scarred, limped gently beside him, alive, though no longer the warrior he once was. The children adored him. They learned patience from his steady gaze, courage from the way he never flinched. Ethan would sometimes catch himself smiling as he watched them, the way he used to smile in old photographs before everything burned. Olivia walked across the field carrying 2 mugs of coffee. The years had softened her sharpness. There was warmth now in the way she spoke his name. "You should rest, you know," she said. He shook his head. "Later." His voice was gentle. A group of children gathered nearby, giggling as Ranger followed their commands. Sit, stay, fetch. One small boy, no older than 8, tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Sir, were you really a pilot?" Ethan looked down at him, eyes creased from the sun and from life. "Once," he said, "but now I just teach others how to fly, not with engines but with hope." The boy grinned, then ran back to Ranger, who rolled onto his side, tail brushing the grass. Ethan watched them for a while, the laughter, the movement, the morning light catching on Ranger's fur. Beyond the field stood a statue, small and simple, a man in uniform kneeling beside a German shepherd, both looking toward the sky. At the base were the words, "They flew once, and now they help others to rise again." Ethan sat down on the bench, the wood still cool from the night. He closed his eyes and let the sunlight touch his face. Somewhere in the wind, he thought he heard Lauren's voice, soft, proud, at peace. He whispered back, "We're home." Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching, and leaned closer until his nose brushed Ethan's hand. Together they sat as the first full light of day broke over the horizon. In a world that moves too fast, many hearts slow down in silence. Ethan's story reminds us that even when age, illness, or loneliness weigh heavy, love and purpose can still lift us higher. We are never too old to heal, to help, or to hope again. If this story touched your heart, share it. Let someone else feel less alone tonight. Leave a comment for those still fighting their quiet battles. Subscribe to join a circle of faith and kindness. May God bless you with strength, peace, and gentle light in every sunrise yet to come.